So today we're going to be repasting this EVGA Knockout RTX2060. The core temperatures are still alright on it, but I'm starting to see some really high memory temps at about 105 degrees Celsius. It's a weird card because it has no screws in the backplate, and they're all in this side of the PCB to take off the backplate. So I'm guessing I have to take off the heatsink for the core and memory first, and then pop it past this display bracket here. Then I should be able to access it from that side. It's just going to be a little weird getting it past that little lip. Now starting the takedown process, I'm going to take these 4 core screws out. I usually go in a cross pattern when taking them out and putting them back in, though it doesn't really matter as much with taking them out. I still do it. Now at this part I am just setting the screws aside, but it does help to have a little magnetic screw tray as I pull it over here, just to make sure that you don't lose anything. Now finally breaking the seal here for the last screw. Now that we have all the core screws out, all we gotta do is pick this sucker up, and I'm guessing just give it a little pull on the display bracket here so it doesn't really interact as much. And yeah, well, core paste looks fine, but I think I understand why I have a memory heating issue now. For one, I've never seen a card that uses thermal paste pads this thick, if they even work, but I'm gonna trust EVGA with the process, and that dust definitely isn't helping. So I usually use a Q-tip here to clean paste up. It's pretty simple to do. You just drag it across the big glops when you got a lot, and then just scrub it real hard when there's a little amount. Paper towels are fine. I've heard that they can scratch like the dye on the card, so I don't really use paper towels, though I guess it doesn't matter as much with the copper here. Another good thing I've heard to use is coffee filters. A little bit weird, but they don't leave behind particles and aren't hard enough to scratch anything. So now once you get your paste about here, you can just take your next Q-tip and just scrub in a circular motion, and it should all come off pretty easy. Make sure you're using a little bit of pressure when taking this paste off, because it sometimes can be very hard to scrape. Now finishing up cleaning the copper block, I'm going to move over to the GPU core now. Same method for the GPU core, where I just get a Q-tip, start on the edges getting the bulk. You can also, if you're using a scraper or more a like spatula to put your paste on, you can use it to get the big glops off the edge. It's usually easier to do that. Sometimes it'll kind of look like it's not coming off, but trust me, you're making progress. I start swiping up and down, which seems to work pretty well. I don't know how it's better than left or right, but now that I'm starting to get a little bit cleaned up, you can see the reflection popping up on the GPU core. It's always nice to look at these things. They're always so beautiful. Now coming in with my last Q-tip, I'm just gonna get the bulk here and then get some of these edges. Now when finishing up the core here, it's kind of difficult to use a Q-tip to get between these resistors. The paste is non-conductive, so you really don't have to get it off, and any GPU manufacturer is definitely using non-conductive thermal paste except for the new liquid metal, so it really don't matter that much. I'll shine this up a little bit better and we can put some paste on it. Now for thermal paste, I typically use thermalright TF7. It lasts a long time. You usually don't have to re-scrape it off and worry about it being hard or something. It's got great thermal conductivity, and it's only like $7 for a 2 gram tube, so you never really go wrong with it. Usually the method I like to put on though is I like to put a big glock down, get my little spatula over here to the side. Then I just take the spatula at a good angle and just press. As you'll see here with my thumb, I am putting quite a bit of pressure on it. The paste is going to cushion that little area between the spatula and the core. If you don't put any pressure when you're trying to spread this paste, it's going to feel like you're just putting the paste down to pick it right back up. So you're going to have to use a little bit of pressure, but your main goal when using your spatula is just to cover all your corners. Or you could just be like a normal person and put the big glob in the middle and then squish the heat sink to the core and just let gravity do the work. But I kind of feel a little bit more tried and true with my paste spread method. Now that I've got the whole core covered, I'm going to go to the side and fix this up, and I'll show you the end result here. Now typically when I spread my paste, I like to leave a little bump in the center of extra paste, so when I squish the heatsink on it, it spreads a little bit. But the main goal you're looking for is just to make sure there's no air pockets in the paste. Now I did kind of screw up here and I put my paste on before taking off my backplate to look at the backplate thermal pads, which you'll find out here it doesn't really matter that much, but I would recommend not putting the paste on first because I do touch my hand on it while doing this and then I have to repaste it after. Now taking off the backplate is pretty easy once you get to this side of the PCB. It's just 8 screws. And then once you flip it over, you'll use a little bit of force. But I do miss one of the screws here, so it makes it look like I'm using a lot more force than you need to. Though you may need to use that much force. You're not going to break the PCB unless you're bending the PCB to separate the backplate. Now finishing off my last screw here, I have missed another one that's under my hand, but I am going to attempt to pull the backplate off the PCB right here, which does not work. Now that I've got that aside, I'm going to get it here and give it a good pull. Which you can see how much force I'm using here. You really don't have to be worried about breaking the PCB as long as the PCB itself isn't bending. And I still kind of needed that much force to separate the thermal pads from the PCB, but it would have helped if I had taken this last screw out. Now getting that out of the way though, you can see that I just got to give it a little bit of force and it pops right off. Thank God these thermal pads don't look near as bad as the ones on the other side, but I'm still going to give it a little bit of dust down, toss it back together, and we can move on with our pasting. Now just toss in those 8 screws, get our back plate remounted. Also, you can see here the thermal paste has more paste on it because I did stick my hand in it and I am having to repaste after this. Now these screws are kind of tiny and typically it helps to use the magnetic tip of your screwdriver. As you can see here, I kind of struggle with that and I do not follow my own advice. But if you stick it on the tip of the screwdriver, it is a whole lot easier to get it in those holes. Or if you can somehow pre-get it in the holes, but then the magnetic tip of your screwdriver may pull it back out. So the best method is honestly just stick it on the tip of your screwdriver and try not to fuck it up like I am. After the screw falls next to the capacitor right there, I kind of give up on it and get on to the next screw. I'll go back and grab that one later to put into the last hole. But sometimes you need to just grab another screw and keep going. I'm also just really bad at handling small screws and aiming them up with little tiny holes. Now finally I've only got 2 more screws to put in and I can be done with these tiny screws, but now that that's going in, I just need to redo my thermal paste and I'll move on to show you putting the heatsink back on. Now that we've got everything pasted, just got to plug my heat shroud back into the PCB here. If you forget that, you're just going to have copper with no fans on it, so kind of remember that if you took it out. Would help. Now just put it straight down. Make sure you get it over that display bracket back there. Just give it a good press. Hold it together, flip it over. Make sure the holes are lined up properly. Now, usually I just put my screws in here in a cross pattern, the same way I take them out, but a little bit slower. I tighten that one down slightly. I'll grab my next screw. I'll probably do 2 or 3 good turns of it tightening before I move to the next screw. I won't fully tighten them down, as you'll see. Gotta organize my screws. Sometimes you will have a little bit of struggle screwing them in, so put a little bit of pressure on them. As you see there, I did not get that to screw, even though I spun it so many times. Then I accidentally swiped my screw out of the back plate, which is pretty fucking cool, but toss that screw back in there real quick. Now that I've got them in, I just do that cross pattern repeating until they're all tightened down. Do about 2-3 turns each. And then I just go across and make sure they're all tightened down fully. Now with this last screw turn, you finished your repaste. That was a quick and easy guide on repasting the EVGA Knockout 2060. If you've watched this far, I appreciate it. Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and comment to help out the video a little bit with some traction. Appreciate you watching though, and I'll see you in the next video. We'll do a Knockout 1660 Super.